Good morning. How is everybody? Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed on the downhill side of a week in Las Vegas. All right, and we're ready to talk about some exciting stuff. I'm really honored to be even up here to introduce your speaker today. It's going to be an awesome session. Joe McCloskey, who's a true achiever in successful dealer operations, and specifically for today, a benchmark dealer in fixed operations. Joe McCloskey is the president and founder of McCloskey Motors in Colorado Springs. They're celebrating their 30th year of being in business. Congratulations. And Joe has received numerous awards to include the Colorado Independent Dealers Association first two-time winner State Qualified Dealer of the Year Award, NIADA's National Quality Dealer of the Year Award. Recently, McCloskey Motors was presented with the Better Business Bureau's Excellence in Customer Satisfaction Award. McCloskey is the only dealer in the nation to ever win this award. Joe has been a 20 Group member for over 20 years, and he's become a good friend as well. He's awesome fixed ops department. You guys are going to learn a lot. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right. So we'll try and get everybody a little bit woke up this morning. So today's topic is how to make your fixed operations department more profitable. Today we will cover a lot of information, so whether you're an experienced with running fixed operation department or a beginner, our goal is to have you leave here today with several takeaways to help improve your profitability. Much of what we talk about today will either be in the handouts that you should have. If you don't have one, hold up your hand and Justin will get one to you. And we will also, at the back of your packets, is an information sheet that you can request a slide presentation, and Justin will email those slides to you. The reason why we did that is we're going to be moving very quickly, and we wanted to make sure that you weren't busy taking notes and trying to keep up that way. You're welcome to take the notes, but hopefully we did a lot of that heavy lifting for you. So I'm often asked, why should I have an internal reconditioning department, or why should I ever have a retail customer pay department? If you sublet reconditioning, you can do the work in-house and have an additional profit center for your business. A quick story about us. In our first 5 years doing business, we used to send out our cars for reconditioning work. I'd go out and find independent garages, send my cars to them for reconditioning, and then whenever our customers would have routine maintenance work needed to be done or scheduled services that needed to be done, I'd refer them to those independent repair garages. And soon those garages would fill up with my customer pay work, so much so that they could not do my internal reconditioning any longer, so I'd have to go out and open up another, or go find another independent repair garage. The problem was I kept doing that over and over and over, but I'm a high school graduate from Pueblo, Colorado, and sometimes a little bit dense, so it took 5 times of me doing that to realize, hey, I should be doing this myself because I'm putting all these guys in business and they have a great book of business. If you treat your service department like a separate business, like the one that maybe you're sending your reconditioning to, you can make a lot of money by plus retain your customers. So let's talk a little bit more about internal labor and parts work. A well-run business should ensure that each department or segment is operated as a separate business. Think about it. If you did not have a service department, you would be sending out this reconditioning work to another business and they would make a profit on you. So not keep that reconditioning work in-house and have another profit center for your business. So let's move on to customer pay. Justin, if we could have that slide up there. There we go. The average age, I appreciate that, Justin. The average age of vehicles on the road right now, as you can see, has been climbing. Since 2002 was 9.6 average age. And again, we could send these slides to you if you like on your email, just at the end of the meeting. It is climbing up to 11.7 years. Next, if we could have that next slide there for us, Justin. I know you're busy doing multitasking there. The sweet spot of customer pay work is between 6 and 11-year-old vehicles. Why? Because these vehicles are coming fresh out of warranty work. They're still a newer car. People want to have that maintenance and service work done, such as 30Ks, 60Ks, and the like. And that sweet spot is growing at a rate of 26% per year. The next 5 years, if you look at the far end of the slide on your right-hand side, the next 5 years looks great because those vehicles that are still in that warranty period, that is growing at a rate of 34% per year. So meaning in the next 5 years, that market will be growing at 34%. 12-year-old vehicles are growing at a rate of 40% per year. Again, another wonderful value proposition for having a customer pay. Another benefit of having customer pay service work is that statistics show that if you can get a customer to return to your service department 8 times within a couple years, but 8 times, then they're 80% more likely to return back to your service department or return back to your dealership to purchase another car. Retail service is much more recession-proof. Regardless of the economy, people get their vehicles serviced. In a bad economy, they're much more likely to have their vehicles repaired rather than buying a new one. In a good economy, they're much more likely to maintain their cars very, very well, pay the extra money to have their 30Ks, 60Ks done, and they will also purchase much more accessories. That is where they get the terminology of fixed operations when describing parts, service, body shop. The reason for that is that fixed operations means that income stream is much more stable and is not likely to fluctuate as much and respond to the economy as much as maybe vehicle sales would. The best way to improve anything is to define exactly what it is that you want to improve, quantify it, measure it, and focus your energy to move it in the direction that you want. The following are some terms and conditions and formulas to define, quantify, and measure your service department. So let's review your handouts if you'll pick those up for me. And what I'd like to do is introduce some specific terms and definitions from the glossary. Again, there's some people in the room that are well experienced with running a fixed operation, so some of this might seem elementary. Some of these terms you may not have thought about before, so hopefully we'll introduce some new metrics for you. If you're a beginner and it seems a little bit complicated, just bear with us, and you can reread these formulas and definitions. So the first one that we want to talk about on your glossary is the annual number of repair orders needed. So simply what we're doing, and I'll describe the formula real quick, is you take your sales needed, divided by the average repair order size, gives you the annual number of repair orders. This calculation will help you to determine how many repair orders you will need annually in order to reach your sales and profit goals. Annual visits, and this is another benchmark you want to have internally within your service departments. That is the number of visits you expect each customer to come into your service department each year. It's important to note that the average customer pay customer will visit your service department roughly about 3 times a year. Your average daily sales needed is your gross profit divided by your gross profit percentage divided by your days open equals the average daily sales needed. This calculation simply identifies the daily sales target required to accomplish your sales and profit goals. Average hourly technician wage is just that. All of your flag technicians, not hourly technicians, but your flag technicians, added up and divided by the number of technicians. So let's talk about average hourly technician wage available. So we're going to break away from the order of your glossary, and if you go to the bottom of the 3rd page to a section called Labor Gross Profit. Under Labor Gross Profit, you'll find that at the bottom of your 3rd page. I'm doing that to try and keep everybody awake. I saw a couple of comas already. But the labor at the bottom of your page, 3rd page, we're going to talk about labor gross profit. The definition is your labor sales. So this is labor sales only, no parts, no shop supplies or any other, but just total retail labor sales minus your technician, your flag technician payroll, would then equal your gross profit. And that's how you determine the gross profit in fixed operations. So now let's flip back over to the front page. You take your average hourly technician wage, which is your hourly revenue times your labor rate of 30%. So what we're saying, when you take your average, you take your total sales, subtract your technician wages should be 30% of your sales is the benchmark, leaving 70% as your gross profit. So what we're doing here in this calculation will help you to determine how much is available to compensate your technicians and maintain the labor gross profit that's required to accomplish the optimum overall gross profit. What we're doing is, if you look further in that description, you take your $25 an hour technician, and I realize in some markets technicians get paid quite a bit, but I try to come up with a blend here. $20 technician and a $17 technician, that means that they average $20.66. If your labor ratio declines, you'll have less money to pay your technicians. So in other words, if your gross profit percentage drops down to 68%, that means that now you're paying your staff 32% of the sales. That means that you no longer have your profit margins getting compressed. Now let's drop all the way down on that, down to the section that says gross profit percentage on your flyer. It should be at the bottom. I don't have, mine's a little bit different. But the gross profit percentage, how you determine that is you take your gross profit divided by the total service department sales. So what we're trying to do is describe here is how much money, we're going back to the average hourly technician wage, is once you determine, you take your total technician hourly wages, you want to make sure that you're running about a 30%. And the idea behind this is that if you're running about a 28% compensation, you can afford to pay your technicians more. And again, as the market's becoming much more competitive, you want to keep an eye on this. We'll talk about how to increase your gross profit a little bit later on. So moving on, we have the average repair order size, which is you add up your labor sales and part sales divided by the number of ROs. Your break even per day is just that. This is the amount that you need to take care of all of your expenses per day. Clock hours. Some of you are new to and beginners. There's a big difference between clock hours, which is actually clocking in, time clock, and flag time. Flag time is a piece of work or the actual time that it takes to do the job. Daily repair orders required. This will give you the number of vehicles that you will need to service each day, and it gives you the formula for that. Your effective labor rate, which we'll be talking about a little bit, is your retail labor sales divided by your flag hours. The flag hours are just what I described. Frequency of visits, once again, should be an average of about 3 visits per year per customer pay car. Keep in mind, if there's multiple cars in a household, then one household, if you have 3 cars in a household, that would be 9 visits per household per year. The gross profit percentage we already covered. Your hourly revenue is your labor rate divided by your labor mix. It gives you your hourly revenue. Hourly revenue is the volume of sales your business generates in parts, labor, sublet, environmental fees, and shop supplies for every hour that's billed. You have these different multiple revenue streams that go on to that repair order, and what you're trying to do at that point is saying, okay, well, how much do we actually generate in an hour? Because so many times in our service departments, we're just focused in on effective labor rate or labor hours. This will give you an idea that overall, we're generating maybe $125, $150 per hour in hourly revenue. Your labor ratio is the portion of your business that's generated from the sale of labor. It's calculated by dividing the labor sales to your total sales. Productive technicians, we'll be talking about this in just a minute, but productive technicians that are actually flagging hours. You do not count any technicians that you're paying clock time to. Productivity, you take your flag hours divided by the clock hours to get your technician's productivity. Once again, we'll be revisiting that here in just a minute. Sales needed is just that. The sales needed is the sales volume required to get the gross profit and net profits that you desire. Hours needed per day, we'll get this formula, we'll give you the calculation to tell you how many sold or billed hours your shop will need in order to generate your daily cash and your daily gross profit goals. Sold hours per day per technician. This is something that you also want to keep an eye on because this calculation is your daily sales requirement per technician. Again, what we're doing, even if you're experienced at running a fixed operations, what we're trying to do is take through these reports and slice and take some different angles that we're looking at and some things that hopefully if you're an experienced at running your service department, that'll break down some different metrics for you and be a benefit to your service department. We already talked about labor gross profit, and once again, the effective labor rate is your total labor sales in dollars divided by the total labor hours. Gives you your effective labor rate.
Yeah, Joe, I know working with dealers, a lot of them don't quite understand fully what effective labor rate is. Could you go into that a little bit more and expand on that?
Yeah, there seems to be sometimes some confusion, and even in our stores, we talk about what is our effective labor rate. We talk about that a lot. So just real quick, reviewing it once again, effective labor rate, you take your total labor sales in dollars divided by your total labor hours, flag hours billed. Gives you your effective labor rate. So often I'll talk to people and I say, well, what's your effective labor rate? And then their response is, well, my door rate's $100 an hour. Your door rate is not your effective labor rate. When I start looking at their numbers and their records, sometimes their effective labor rate might be $62 per hour. It's very much like the list price for a vehicle and what the price is that you actually sell the vehicle for. In fixed operations, once again, fixed operations is service, parts, detail, and body shop. We need to break down all of the sources of labor revenue and the corresponding effective labor rate to be able to clearly identify what is happening in our operations and develop the strategies and tactics to improve results. So many of the shops lump all of their labor sales in one bucket and try and determine what their effective labor rate is from that. In order to better measure your effective labor rate, you want to break down and analyze the multiple sources of labor revenue streams coming into your service department. The key is to determine what the effective labor rate is for those multiple sources and specific streams of income to get a clearer picture of what's happening in your fixed operation. So this slide here, I'm going to come down from the podium. Jason, if you could help me here. Okay, so this slide is from an actual service department. And when we're talking about effective labor rates, you may say in your market, well, geez, my market is a lot higher on labor rates and that type of thing, but this is just one kind of like in middle America to give you an idea. So some markets have an effective labor rate of $125, $150 an hour. Some have an effective labor rate for customer pay. Somewhere the door rate might even be $60 an hour. But if you look at this particular sales or service department, you have all labor types. So in all labor types, forgive me for this bouncing red ball. With my steady hands, I should have been a brain surgeon. Here, hold still. But anyway, if you look up at the top, we have retail sales dollars in this fixed operations. Total, just labor only, is what we're analyzing. No parts, no shop supplies, nothing else. Labor only, we're at $175,559 in retail sales. The shop generated in flag hours 2,633 hours in flag time. So you take 175,559 divided by the 2,633, gives them an effective overall labor rate of $66.67. You'd say, well, geez, that's not really that good. That's actually kind of low. I'd be unhappy with that. So this particular shop, what they do is weekly is they break down what their different revenue streams are. Next, what they do on the second category, where it says customer pay, labor sales. They now break out just on customer pay. And on customer pay, labor sales, they did $58,881 divided by the 718 on the flag hours gives them an effective labor rate of $82. Big difference. Then they break out and say, okay, just on our internal labor, and including they happen to have a detail shop, they're doing internal labor, including detail, of $96,375. So somebody would ask me, why should I have why should I do my own internal work? This particular service department does close to $100,000 in just labor sales, not parts, just labor sales, including detail, $96,375 divided by the 1,624 flag hours gives them an effective labor rate of $59.33. You'd say, well, geez, that's still a little bit low. So they break it down a little bit further, and then they'd say, okay, now just let's go back and look at all of our operations, just our mechanics. Take out the detail department. My point is, so many shops lump everything into one bucket and then try and determine their effective labor rate. Mechanics all, no detail. They did $131,361 both in customer pay and internal labor, 1,709 hours. It gives you $76.85 effective labor rate. So then if they say, okay, well, on our customer pay, what is our effective labor rate? We have a door rate of, let's say, $95 an hour. Customer says, well, what's your door rate? When they walk in, it says our labor rate on the sign says $95 an hour. How close to that are we actually getting? And this shop breaks it out. They take out detail and they take out internal, and they did $51,000 in sales divided by $567 flag hours. They're running at an effective labor rate of $90 per hour with the door rate of 95, so actually they're doing a pretty good job. Mechanic techs internal with this particular shop is at $51,898. This is without detail. They're running an effective labor rate of $60.95. Now, we broke this down further for this service department, and it turns out that this service department does a lot of inspections, this dealership does. They get a high volume of vehicles that are a lower value trade-in, much less like a $1,000 or less ACV trade-in. So they charge internally $45 to do an inspection on these vehicles. About 85% of the vehicles don't pass an inspection. It takes too much to repair them, so they send them off to auction. So that is driving their effective labor rate down. They know that, and they're fine with that. So just as, again, this is not to judge what this means, not to say what your effective labor rate should be. I'm just trying to say you need to break it down so you can analyze it. Service contracts, you can see on that line, they did $16,000 in service contracts, and that effective labor rate is dictated quite often by the extended service contract company, and you want to keep an eye on that. Detail department only, so they just do, on their detail departments, they did about $44,179 in details, and their effective labor rate is $47.88. So hopefully that'll give you an idea. You could break it down, and if you have a service department, I would strongly suggest you analyze the multiple streams. Yes?
What are you flagging? How do you flag detail hours? You just assign each car a certain amount of hours?
Yeah, I think personally for us, we give them, we break it down between a car wash, a spiff, and then a detail. A detail, typically the standard for us is 3 hours to detail a car. They can apply, if they have a dog house, they can apply with their managers. The manager looks at it and says, yeah, you're going to need 5 hours to get this job done, to get all the dog hair out and all. So, but standard we have in our service department is 3 hours. So hopefully that'll help break things out for you a little bit better. And you can see this service department also tracks down at the bottom. They have labor gross profit, not sales, but gross profit, $129,000. This is not including parts. And their gross profit percentage, to measure it every week, is at 71.6% gross profit. So hopefully that helps out quite a bit. Okay, next, let's talk about parts obsolescence. Jason, okay. Parts obsolescence is, you'd say, well, I really don't have a parts department. You do have a parts department. Yes?
Yes, no problem. Before we get on to this next part, the internal labor you're talking about in the last one, do you charge it at the full door rate, or is there we use a pass-through when we have reconditioning or something like that, but are you applying the same $95 an hour rate on those invoices, or is there a lowered rate for internal gross service?
That's a great question. And it's always the main question of the sales department. And again, my position is, this is just my personal opinion. It's got to be rigid in principle and flexible in approach. So rigid in principle means that they should be paying. If I would be sending that car out, if I didn't have a service department, I'd be sending it out and I'd be paying $95 an hour anyway, right? So typically, the way we run it in our store is I run $95 an hour on most repairs. Once in a while, if I have a customer pay, I call the service director, not customer pay, but we have an internal issue. Say I screwed up on buying a car. You know, it looked great as it's going down the lane. I call it the walk of sobriety. I've been married to my wife for 41 years, but I remember back in the days of the disco, lights were dim. After a couple of beers, girls looked a little bit prettier than what they were when I woke up the next morning. So I call it the walk of sobriety. And the thing has a problem, we can't get to arbitrate it, and I'll call them, and sometimes I'll knock them down to $45 an hour just to get the vehicle done. In our market, and again, I'm just saying flexible in approach. In our market, we live in Colorado, a lot of mountains, and we buy a lot of rental cars. I would say 98% of the rental cars all need brakes. So we have a special labor rate just for brakes because sometimes it gets cost prohibitive.
Joe, real quick before you move on too, Steve had a question, Steve Matthews over here, about benchmarks and effective labor rate. And even if we don't have a statistic on us, what are you looking for as far as kind of your benchmark on effective labor rate?
Insofar as dollars or? I'm a little bit confused by the question.
As far as their efficiency.
On their efficiency.
Right. I've seen some that are over 100%.
So,
that's the one you want.
So are you talking efficiency or productivity? Efficiency? Yeah, I think what we'll do, and I'll come back and answer that if we have time, if that's okay, because that might take me down a whole different track, and I'll be happy to answer that question for you, okay? So I'll be around after the meeting, okay? And definitely we'll do it. If we have time, I'll be sure and pick that up, okay? Is that okay? Okay, so next, let's talk about parts obsolescence. Parts obsolescence, you do have obsolete parts in your department. A good way to control these obsolete parts, which are obsolete parts, filters, broken parts, etc., is to add 5% to every purchased part cost. What you do is reserve this money and use it to write off these obsolete parts, damaged cores, or parts broken during installation. If you don't use this money at the end of the year, you can simply just bring it back in a profit. So another benchmark, moving on, that we want to talk about is the gross profit benchmark should be 40% of the gross profit for parts. Many people confuse the difference between a percentage of a parts markup, and what they do is they take a percentage of a number, meaning that if that costs, let's say the parts cost is $100, they take that times 40%, and they say, I have a 40% gross profit. That's incorrect. On this next slide, for example, if an incorrect example of this is, and I'm going to come down here, Jason, real quick. if they have, an incorrect example is they take $100 times 40% is an incorrect sale price. To prove this point, if you take $100, that sales price, and subtract 40%, you actually end up with a net cost as reflected as $84 is incorrect. So what they're doing is they're taking a percentage of a number. The correct way of computing this is you should take, I think we have the next slide there. The accurate way to obtain a true gross profit margin is take that same $100 and for 40%, you want to mark it up 66.67%, which would give you a sale price of $166.67, which is correct 40% gross profit margin, also known as Gordy knows as a delta percent markup. The difference that we're talking about is that you're taking a percentage of a number versus taking a 40% margin on top of a number. There's a big difference between the two. So make sure, and I've seen a lot of heads going, yeah, that's simple, but there's a lot of service departments that are taking 40% of a number, and that's actually, and I've seen a lot of parts managers actually do that as well, and that's actually maybe about a 27% gross profit margin, if I remember right. So moving on, another way to handle your parts is to use a parts matrix. Now this parts matrix is my gift to you for a nice round of applause at the end of this, because I don't talk to groups as a living. I'm a used car dealer just like everybody else, and I'm only joking about the applause part. But we'll email this to you, and this is an actual parts matrix. So parts matrix, how it works is in this column here, you enter the parts cost. And what we're trying to do in this column, what we're trying to do is put in a parts cost. You'll see on the column next to it, we're taking a percentage of number for our obsolete parts. We're marking that up by 5%. We're adding 5% to the cost. So now we have a purchase order price of $1.05. Every part that goes through your parts department, any part, detail, body shop, car wash, whatever the case may be, should be run through the parts matrix. At the top line, where you see 0.01 to 499 is now the parts cost. If that part cost is right below that, we're going to mark up that part 80%. And the parts matrix does this for you. It's built in Excel. It's pretty simple to do. So that means we take that part, add $1, we add 5% to it for the obsolete parts. You have a purchase order price of $1.05. That's your internal parts cost. We mark it up 80%, and we're going to retail that part to our customers for $5.25. Now, some people would say, holy smokes, 80% markup, we're gouging the customers. I will tell you, every retail business does this. This casino, every casino, the Quickie Mart, you go in and you pay a very competitive price for gas, but you walk in, the whole idea is to get you in and walk into a Quickie Mart, and you're buying Slurpees, candy bars, you're chewing tobacco, whatever case may be, at a much, much higher. They might have 300-400% markup on those low-priced items. As we're going across, you'll see the 80%. We now have 71%, 69%, 54%, depending upon the cost of the part, and it drops all the way down to 13%. Because if you take a part that costs $5,000 and you have a gross profit margin on a part that costs $5,000 of 40%, you're going to price yourself completely out of the market. The customer's going to go out and start shopping you and saying that price cost is way too high. But if you only mark it up 20%, now you're competitive and as well. Although on that same repair order, for the other items that go along, your gasket kits and those other things that go along with that, you may be marking up those parts 80%. So in this parts matrix, it's very easy. What you do is you just put in a parts cost. You can see here, I put in part cost at $300, just at random. So our internal part price is $315. And what does that say that we should sell that part for? Can you see? Yep, so that's what we should sell it for. And that is a 41%. If you use a parts matrix, and you have to make sure everyone uses it, that will give you, this particular one, will give you an overall parts gross profit of 40%. Okay, so moving along, for sake of time, allow me to review some other benchmarks. The combined labor, whoops, sorry about that. I need to quit stepping in front of the speaker. Yeah.
Parts. A lot of us don't always have parts departments, but we really do. Do you mark your parts up at the same price as your customer pay? Use the same percentage for your internal?
Yes. So we use both internal and customer pay. We run them through on the same parts matrix. Yeah. And if you don't have a parts department, then the person that you have ordering the parts, they have to run the parts through, regardless of where they got the part, even used parts. They order it on eBay or whatever. They run everything through 100% through parts matrix for their parts pricing.
Joe, one more quick question and then we'll move on.
I was curious how you came up with the sliding scale for the decreasing percentage amount. Is it based on the market price of that part in the area? You know, you went from 80 to 71 to 69 to 54. Where are those numbers actually coming from?
Years of experience. Basically what we're looking for is a blend of 40%. So when I'm saying that, we've been in business for many years. We've looked at many other parts matrices, and they all pretty much are all about the same. So your percentages, you can play with it any way you want. Again, this is not a standard must do. Even if you're doing a lot of higher end repairs, you also, with that higher end repair, you also have lower end parts. Good example, we've all seen Just Brakes, right? Just Brakes has brake specials of $49 per axle. I don't know about you, but that's pretty cheap. Well, what they don't include, they have the price there at $49, right? Everybody's seen those ads trying to compete against them. Well, then their brake hardware is marked up about 400%. So if they have to build on, like the springs and calipers and those types of things, they'll mark those up 300 to 400%, and that's how they make the money. But they give away, it's the pad slap of $49. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Okay, so another benchmark. Hopefully that answers your question. So you have to kind of blend it for yourself. This is not scientific. It's just mathematical, and you have to adjust it for what fits best in your market, in your store. Again, though, the big thing is having a discipline. 100% of the parts get through the parts matrix, whatever it is that you decide. Okay. So now we talked about 70% gross profit margin. Yes, for labor, 40% for parts. So your combined parts and labor gross profit together should be 60%. So as you're looking at your combined gross profit margin, both labor at 70%, parts at 40%, combine them, you should be at 60% as another benchmark. Each bay, each technician should be generating a minimum of $15,000 gross profit per month. So let's talk about next technician productivity, because this is a big issue, at least in our store and every store that I talk about. That's a really good question. Luke, that's really good. The one thing I love about the car business is that there's an exception to every rule. Where we're located, for us personally, I'm surrounded. I could literally throw a rock, and I can't throw that well, but I could throw a rock and hit 5 tire stores. So we have a very low markup on tires, right? But then we run the tire weights, and we run valve stems, we mark all those up. Does that make sense? Typically a dollar amount, we'll try for like $20 per tire, and then go after the alignments and suspension and those things to try and get that done. Good question. So let's talk about technician productivity. It's important to note that you're not selling service in your fixed operations. What you're truly selling is time. Much like in an attorney, they have a specialized skill, and attorneys do not sell their skill. What they sell is their time to perform that skill. They sell their time, and in service, you sell the technician's time. So if a technician works 40-hour clock hours, they're clocked in for 40 hours, and they produce 32 hours of flag time, the technician would be 80% productive. The result is that 20% of their time clocked in, they were not flagging hours or generating income. So what's the math on that 20% of lost potential revenue due to poor technician productivity? What does 20% of unproductive technician time actually cost the business? Well, let's say that a technician is clocked in, time punched in, 40 hours a week over 52 weeks in a year, and we divide that by 12 months. That means that a technician potentially, depending upon the month and the number of working days, but on average, has 173.33 hours that they're clocked in for the month. So if they're at 100% productivity, they're flagging 173.33 hours worth of work in a month. If a technician is 80% productive, it means that that technician is clocked in for 173.33 hours, but is only producing 138.66 hours for the month. This lost 20% flag time would be 34.66 flag hours for the month, which you may say, well, it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you take it times just $90 an hour, and I talked to a shop yesterday, and I think their door rate is 125, but if you just take it at $90 an hour, that means $3,119 in lost monthly revenue. Take that over a 12-month period, that means that it'd be $37,432 gross profit lost revenue. Now, another benchmark is that typically your parts gross profit revenue will run 50% of your labor revenue, meaning that on a repair order, if you're generating $100 in labor revenue, you should be having parts revenue, parts gross profit at $50. So if we just use that for this example, the parts gross profit revenue being at 50% of the labor revenue would be $18,716 in lost annual parts gross profit, and lost revenue for the year, including parts and labor, would be $56,148. I always like to take things times 12 for the year, and that would mean that unproductive technicians, if you have 4 unproductive technicians, and they're unproductive for 20% of the time throughout the entire year, that would cost your business $225,000 in annual lost gross profit. So technicians are hard to find. It's important to keep them and making money for themselves. If you want a happy technician, they got to be making money. Make money for themselves and your company. So it's important to be tracking the productivity, and this shows management the actual time a technician works in a day, and allows them to see whether the shop has enough work for the technicians and whether the work is ready for them when they are available. To get a true reading of productivity, you must have the technician clock in immediately upon arriving at work, clock out and back in for scheduled breaks, clock out and back in for lunch, and then clock out for the day. That's the only way you can truly measure productivity. And it all starts with the owner or manager setting the goals, measuring these goals. So let's talk real quick about how to solve low productivity. So the minimum productivity benchmark is 100%. The standard productivity is about 125 to 135%. A great job is 150% productivity. which means that the technician is flagging 60 hours worth of work while only clocked in for 40 hours for the day. These are very efficient technicians, and in our shop we have 3 or 4 of them, and boy, do we treat them like gold. So you watch the technician's productivity every day, weekly and monthly. Monday mornings, evaluate the productivity for the previous week and month to date. And don't wait until the end of the month to start doing something about it. So how you solve productivity, first of all, you want to take a look and see whether or not you have a high enough car count. Car count is one of the biggest contributors to low productivity. You want to look at your dispatching. Is your dispatch process efficient? A poor dispatch process means that you have repair order tickets sitting on the counter and the technicians are standing around not doing any work. That's an indicator of an inefficient process. Another thing that would actually drive on dispatching is dispatching a job to the incorrect technician. If the technician's got to slow down, go on YouTube, look at videos, or go on Mitchell or AllData and try and figure out how to do the repair, you just now have killed your productivity. You need to make sure you're dispatching the jobs to the proper technicians based upon their skill level. Do you have a poor parts process? Parts department, and you'd say, well, we don't have a parts department. Maybe you need to hire a parts person to help get those parts in quickly and efficiently. Another thing that we do in our store that works really well is to have one person do all of the inspections. Both recon and customer pay. On reconditioning and internal work, we found that we could get a consistent level of performance of our standards for reconditioning. The old way we were doing it, we were having each line technician do their own inspections, and it was based upon their mood or how short they were on the hours as to how much reconditioning work needed to be done on the car. This way, if you have one person that does it, it takes all of that subjectivity out and we can get a consistent performance standard. And again, we do this both on customer pay and internal. Because if they're busy, they got another job going that pays more and they're doing an oil change, I'll get with you here in just a second, they're doing an oil change, they might speed through that customer pay inspection just so they could get back to their other job. This way you can get a consistent standard. In our shop, what we do is we pay, and who works really well for this is a guy of my age, an older technician who can no longer physically do the line work, but they're a master technician, somebody usually you could trust, and we pay them a guaranteed pay, right? And then each inspection that they do, they flag their time for it, which goes against their guaranteed pay. And typically they earn more on the flag pay than what they do, and that all we do is just pay them on the inspections. So this one person, what they do is they also determine the flag time that needs to be done for the job. So again, if you're having your own technicians determining their flag time, there's again a lot of subjectivity in there. This one person goes out and determines what the parts are, what needs to be needed. They either talk with your parts department or they go out and search and find the parts themselves. They get the approval for the recon, and then they proceed. For an inspection, we charge, internally we charge, I think it's 9/10. Yeah, so basically an hour is what we give them. It depends. You know, if he starts it up in the middle of the parking lot and it's hammering really hard, we leave it up to him. He might just charge, like 15 minutes or something to go find the keys. Just usually the car I bought, by the way. So the key is that the technicians love this process because this is all being done while the technicians are turning wrenches and they're not getting bogged down in time-eating procedures. Under the old system of line techs doing the inspections, once the parts arrive, we also found in our store that the vehicle that needed to be reconned was having to wait while the technician was finishing up a major 2-day job, and that vehicle's just sitting there waiting for him. The wait and it's been held because that technician's the one that did the inspection. under the old system. The new system, when we came out with this, there is no dibs on a car being in the recon process. Your time to line goes extremely fast because what you do is you get into parts, you intake the parts. It's already now been approved. So all you simply do is go out to the next available technician that is qualified to do the repair. You go up to them, you say, here's the work that needs to be done, here's the parts, there's the car, now go. And they run out there and they go get the car, and they love it because they can just keep going. It's very efficient. They don't even have to wait for the parts. And the parts were ordered by the master technician, so they have a lot better efficiency on the parts acquisition process. Another way to improve productivity is preload your shops. Before the technicians go home at night, you make sure, whether a technician pulls it in or a porter, that there's a vehicle waiting in their bay the moment that they walk in, and they immediately start working on those cars. Also, what we do is we line up all the work that needs to be done in front of the technician bays. We have a particular aisle, and we do that so, one, they see how much work needs to be done, and just because of pride or urgency, they see all the work needs to be done, and they have a tendency to pick up their pace. You pay you want to watch your unapplied time being too high. You want to pay your technicians by flag hour and not by clock hour. The clock hour, when they punch in, there's really no incentive, and I understand you may have a good technician working for you that insists that they work really hard, but there's really no incentive to beat the clock, which is what productivity is all about. So let's move on and let's talk about shop supplies, what I call the secret sauce. Jody? I'm sorry? Let me clarify that. This one person that does the inspection either coordinate, in our shop we have a parts department, so he coordinates the acquisition of the parts through the parts department. In the shop that doesn't have a parts department, that one person does the inspection, actually researches and locates the parts. The technicians under the old system, not in our shop, but in some shops, the technicians try and find the parts. And again, they're sitting on hold, waiting for AutoZone or Advanced Auto Parts or the salvage yard to come give them an answer on the part. And I've seen actual mechanics doing that, and that just kills your productivity. So let's get back to the secret sauce, to additional gross profit. Shop supplies is just like D&H on a car sale. Every repair, whether it's customer pay, internal, or extended service contract, requires the consumption of small tools. These include lubricants, cleaners, adhesives, rags, gaskets, screws, nuts, bolts, razor blades, cleaners, solvents, and yes, duct tape, and Velcro. No baling wire. Typically, a repair shop would charge 15% of both your total repair, including parts and labor, or a maximum of $60. You might want to check on this locally because there are some legal rules in your area, but virtually every shop is able to charge shop supplies. So every repair, including detailing, cleanup, should be charged a shop supplies fee. Depending upon the size of your operation, you should be shown a shop supply profit of between $1,000 and $4,000 per month. And again, it's a separate line item on your financial statement. So real quick, how are we doing on time, Justin? We've got a few minutes. Do you want me to continue on with two things, or do you want to, we have about 5 minutes. You want me to break it open for questions?
Do we have any questions on the floor now? Got one here, Joe.
Okay.
We have a hell of a time getting technicians, and the ones that I've, had in the past, they're either they're great part replacers, but not great mechanics. Do you have any recommendations for seeking out good, qualified technicians? And how do you, once you get them in, how do you determine, and how long do you take to determine whether or not they're beating book time?
That's a good question. Technicians are hard to find. Like I said last year in the seminar, the one thing that we try and do, I'm from Colorado, so we grow our own, right? Many things we grow. And so what we try and do is grow our own technicians, and we'll assign them to a master technician, particularly one that may be not able to perform all the line work, and we'll just donate that apprentice to them, maybe coming out of technical school or whatever, Duluth Tech, and moving them and have them start working with them within about a year. We'll have a C-Tech, and then we'll start progressing on up through that way. One of the best ways we've found is we've taken our tool trucks, drivers that come in, backhoe, Snap-on, or whatever, and we show them, we have the master technician show them our process, particularly the one person doing inspections. And they'll say, I'm doing 150% productivity week in, week out, week in, week out. And then they say, by the way, if you happen to know somebody, let us know. The parts trucks, the shop tool trucks won't really go out and solicit, but they'll hear somebody be complaining about it, and they'll say, hey, if they have what they feel is a good technician, they'll refer them to us. The other thing is when we do have a candidate, we're able to get one in, we have them talk to our technicians that are flagging that. And because of that, the biggest way is the productivity. What technicians don't like, you may have a very good one, but they don't like the productivity if they can't make the hours. So if they see that, like in our shop, they have the infrastructure to get that productivity, and it's streamlined and efficient, we'll have a better chance of recruiting them.
That's awesome. Let's give Joe McCloskey a big hand. Was that incredible?
Thank you. Thanks.
Now, Joe's been generous enough to provide you with his email up here if you'd like to get a hold of him. Mine's up there as well. If you'd like more training on fixed ops on the back of your packet, there's a sheet that you can rip off and put your name and email. We can reach out to you with opportunities for more training on the fixed operation side of it. Also, Joe, do you have a couple minutes? To take questions?
Yeah.
If you got questions you didn't get answered and you want to come up and talk to Joe, he'll be up here for a few minutes. Have a great day, and we'll see you at the next session.